Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
I am Michael McGalley, and I'm very happy to have the opportunity to introduce Andrew Yang today. Andrew and I met a few weeks ago, or a month and a half ago, down in New Orleans, where we were both at New Orleans Entrepreneurship Week. And Andrew is the CEO and founder of Venture for America, as you know. Previously, he was the CEO of Manhattan GMAT, the GMAT prep course that he then sold to Kaplan, and had kind of a realization that what he really wanted to do was to enable entrepreneurship, and in order to do that, he began Venture for America. And I think that it was Peter Drucker who said the most entrepreneurial thing you can do is start a university. Andrew's kind of flipped that on its head and said, well, actually, what he's going to do is work to make American universities more entrepreneurial, or make the graduates of those universities more entrepreneurial. And so happy to have him here today. Please welcome me in giving Andrew a warm welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. How familiar are you guys with Venture for America? So raise your hand really high if you know everything about it, and then like not at all if you know very, very little. All right, a lot of not so much. So Venture for America, as Michael suggested a little bit, is meant to address this problem. And this is a problem I was talking with Tim about in the back. It's a problem that maybe some of you have thought deeply about and some of you have thought absolutely nothing about. It's that if you're a young, smart person in the United States today, the odds of you becoming an investment banker, management consultant, or like I was, a corporate attorney, the odds are pretty high. And if you want to do something like startups or anything else, then the odds are actually a little bit low. So how many of you guys have actually had a thought like this at some point ever? All right, a lot of you, which is unsurprising to me because you guys, in my mind, represent industry, an innovative industry in the form of Microsoft. So you guys actually build incredibly valuable tools that help other businesses come into being. So you guys, in my mind, are over here on the extreme left, on like the good end. And then over on the far right is what a number of people are doing. And there's not a knock on them because we all went to school with them, or we were them in some cases. I graduated from Brown. Anyone aside from Michael and me graduate from Brown? No one? Disappointing. So I graduated from Brown in the mid-90s and had no idea what to do, and so I went to law school. Anyone do that? Good. a lot of dodged bullets in this room. So I went to law school at Columbia. Found law school clarifies very little about what you want to do. And so I became a corporate attorney in New York doing banking and M&A transactions at a firm called Davis Polk & Wardwell. And so I resemble this, and so I understood how this came about. So just to run through some of the numbers, if you graduated from Harvard in 2012, there were, generally speaking, 6 default paths for you: financial services, law school, management consulting, medical school, graduate school, Teach for America. Teach for America had 4% of 2012 Harvard grads become core members and about 14% apply. Then after that, you have nonprofits, government, military, media, arts, sports, communications. Industry and IT is where you guys fall, Microsoft. And then undecided traveling is 13%. So I joke that they went, found themselves, and then come back and apply to law school or become management consultants. So the industry IT side, if you were to try and suss out how many Harvard grads went to startups, it's a sliver of a sliver. It would be like a subset of that 10%. So how many of you guys went to Harvard? I bet a few of you. Also none. So first, is this surprising, unsurprising, familiar to you, unfamiliar, like shocking, totally not shocking? See someone smiling. What's your name, sir?
Excuse me?
So I was thinking you, Stephen.
Yeah. Steve Schwartz.
Steve. So yeah, you were smiling because this is totally what you expected, or?
Yeah, I'm aware of this. My son is a member of your BFA, so that's why I came to see you.
Wow, that's incredible. What's your son's name?
Brian Schwartz.
Oh yeah. Yeah, Brian's a good guy. No wonder you raise your hand so much. So someone else, someone who found this stuff totally like unsurprising? Anyone? Anyone? Yeah.
I graduated like a year ago, like today pretty much actually, and I'd say felt like 90% of my friends either fell into finance or management consulting, and they struggled to think about any other option that was equivalent to something that would make them successful after graduation. So I'm very familiar with this phenomenon.
And you went to Duke?
Yes.
Yeah. Anyone else? Just give me a show of hands if you said yes, this is totally unsurprising, and you know you either went through this yourself or know people who went through it. Like the vast majority of us. And so it wasn't just me. So in my case, I went to law school out of Brown. But if you look at the other schools like Duke or Cornell or Columbia or Penn, so it's not just a Harvard thing. If you look at any of the top schools, you see patterns among the top employers and the paths that they take, where these 6 default paths really end up being the paths of least resistance for national university graduates around the country. I'm sure some of you guys went to these schools. I'm going to stop with the school thing, though. All right, so now, what does this mean regionally? So if you have a hyper concentration of smart young people heading to banking, law, and consulting, where does that mean they move after college? Like, where did all your friends go? It was Stephen, right?
Yeah, New York.
Yeah, so New York's one. Where else?
Connecticut.
Silicon Valley.
San Francisco, Boston. Chicago would be 5 or 6. DC, LA. So they had the top 4 are New York, San Francisco, Boston, and DC. Chicago and LA are 5 and 6. Now, if you look at the rest of the country, you have a bunch of states with difficulty generating new businesses and creating jobs in those regions. And they're essentially non-overlapping with the talent destinations, with the exception of California, which is so massive that it can have big problems in addition to having some pockets of prosperity. And so if you're a smart young person from a state like, let's say, Georgia, and you went to Duke with Stephen, the odds of you heading back to Georgia and starting a business or working in a growth company there are really, really low. The odds of you becoming a banker, consultant, or lawyer in New York or DC very high. And if you do this for a couple of decades, you end up with an economic picture that looks something like this. At Venture for America, we kind of joke that smart people are doing 6 things in 6 places. They're becoming bankers, consultants, lawyers, doctors, academics, or teachers in New York, San Francisco, Boston, DC, Chicago, LA. So what do you guys think of this picture? First, well, is this surprising? Were you guys familiar with this? Thoughts? Response? Yeah?
I was surprised that Atlanta was actually falling under the yellow star. I would think Atlanta it has consulting and it has pretty much the center of the South. So.
Yeah, Atlanta does get a lot of talent from the southeast part of the U.S. And if we were to look at the talent in migration numbers, I think you're right. It would probably be like top 12 in the country. It's just the yellow stars are actually statewide job creation numbers. That's a good observation. So this picture, one, is just numerical. I mean, those are just where states don't have as many employment opportunities. But I think there's a picture we're all familiar with, having gone to a number of institutions that funnel, like with Stephen and Duke, a disproportionate number of graduates to a select number of cities. And I'm not sure where Seattle falls in terms of this discussion. I feel like you guys are like right after Chicago and LA, at least in my mind. It's like, and then it'd be like Seattle and Austin would be like the next level. I can see some nods there. So if the weather was like this, you guys would be like, top 3. The weather was like this all the time. So why is it then that so many young people do the same handful of things? Like, what does this list look like? Why is it that so many of your classmates end up becoming management consultants, even though they probably had no idea what management consulting was when they showed up on campus? So factors?
Money.
So money is certainly a big one, but Teach for America has shown that money isn't necessarily the primary driver all of the time, but money is certainly on this list. What else is on this list? Prestige. What's your name?
Aki.
Aki. Yeah, so prestige certainly there. What else? Keep going.
Experience.
Yeah, gain skills, training, get experience, because most seniors in college don't think of themselves as ready. They want to go to an environment that's going to help make them ready. Stability.
Part of those numbers are driven by those companies that create the market for those universities. So your JP Morgan Chase, your Merrill Lynch's of the world, those are the universities that they recruit from. which then begins to drive that roadmap for the next.
What's your name?
Iris.
Iris. So Iris said something that
Created the market.
many of you guys are agreeing with, which is that a lot of it's influenced by which companies spend time and money recruiting. And so that's certainly like a huge factor. Clearly marked path, easy to find or apply to. So it's prestige, it's progress seeking the next level, it's opens doors, keep options open. So Stephen's friends at Duke, a lot of them weren't making what they think of as lifetime commitments. They're saying, look, I'll do this, it'll look great on my resume, and then the world will be my oyster. And that's something that banks and consulting firms obviously sell pretty heavily. Money, compensation, lifestyle, gain skills, training for the next thing. Community, make sure you don't fall behind peers, work with other smart people. And then there's this notion of doing something that's good, pro-social, like Teach for America. Though this also applies to people who become investment bankers and management consultants, because the thought process is that they need to gain stature and become a baller before they can really do any good. It's like, I will, make lots of money and then I'll go back to the people with loaves of bread from horseback. So what do you guys think of this list? Yeah, so this has been road tested, if you will, on campuses around the country and thousands of young people, and they all say, thumbs up, this is why we do what we do. And certainly, when I went to law school, I think it was some blend of these factors. So on the flip side, who's not getting the talent? The companies that are coming of age or getting started in cities around the country aren't really there at Durham to compete for Stephen and his classmates. And the structural impediments, one, as Iris said, you're not being recruited because the startup is not going to come on campus 6 months in advance and start trying to recruit dozens of people. Two, it's hard to find a suitable company if you did decide to look. You're doing it alone. You have unclear prospects for training, advancement, or success. You have no network, idea, money, or tech proficiency. You just don't think you're ready. And so for most young people, they say, look, I'd love to join a startup. I'd love to be an entrepreneur someday, but first I need to go learn about business, and then I can double back later down the road after I've gained some skills. Stephen, is this an accurate description of those of your friends that might have an interest in entrepreneurship that came out of Duke?
Yeah.
So these are the structural problems, and I'm going to go on a limb and say, if we can help address these issues, then we can do these young people a great service as well as the country and the economy. If we can balance the scales. Because what Iris was suggesting is 100% right about the resources being employed recruiting our young people. So Teach for America has pointed the way. And the question I'm going to ask, and that hopefully we can answer over the coming years, is what would happen if the same proportion of talent that's currently heading to Wall Street, professional services, management consulting, was instead going to startups around the country, to Baltimore, Cleveland, Detroit, New Orleans, Cincinnati, Las Vegas, Philadelphia, to startups in all these cities? How long would that take to impact the rate of job growth and innovation nationwide? Like if we could just reformat the numbers and say, hey, guess what? This year, 50% of Harvard grads and Duke grads or whomever head to startups. How long would that take to have an impact?
1 year.
So I hear 1 year. You said, yeah.
30 years.
30 years.
Silicon Valley. 30 years.
Yeah, so the over-under is somewhere in that range, I would guess. Say it's somewhere between 1 and 30. But one thing that no one here doubts is that it would work. Like we all know it would work. And really the question is, why don't we just make it happen? And the reason why we don't make it happen is in part, as Iris said, a resource question. So Teach for America had its genesis 24 years ago, and this past year it had 50,000 applicants. How many of you guys had friends who did Teach for America, first of all? A number of you. And so, Akeem, you graduated from Princeton last year?
Yeah.
Yeah, so how many of your friends, or you said you had a friend who's doing Teach for America?
Yeah, one is a teacher in LA now.
In LA?
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you know anything about how she became aware of Teach for America?
Wendy Kopp, the founder, went to our school, so she's pretty famous on campus, and I think everyone was talking about it on campus when it came to applying for jobs and what they were going to do next. That's more sort of like word of mouth, I would say.
Yeah, so Teach for America is very well established on campuses, but Teach for America also spent $38 million on recruitment and selection in the last year record. So it's an expensive process trying to recruit young people. And for that $38 million, they got 50,000 applicants for 5,000 spots. So that's how you become the sixth default path for young people, is you spend tens of millions. I have friends who are in financial services recruiting, and they say they spend an analogous amount on recruiting people at Duke and other campuses nationwide. So what's going on right now is there's an arms race, like a stealth arms race for smart people in this country, where some sides are fighting and some sides are not. Now, Microsoft is fighting because you guys are enormous and you say, hey, we need smart people, so let's go get them. The startups cannot really fight that fight because they're out of the way, they don't have the resource, they don't have the brand equity. Even if they went to campus, they would lose because they were like, hey, I'm some company you've never heard of, offering less money and higher risk. Like, who's into that? And most people would say, that's okay. Deloitte has a giant display right next to you. Like, let me go talk to them. Which is not a knock on anyone involved. It's just everyone's doing something very rational. So to fast forward a little bit from me, so I became a corporate attorney in '99 and left in 2000 to start a .com in the first bubble. You guys remember the first bubble? Where were you guys? How many of you guys were here during the first bubble? Probably awesome, a few of you. So the first bubble was excellent, wasn't it? Those are good times. So I started a .com at the age of 25, raised a couple $100,000 and launched this site. We got a lot of press. We're in the New York Times, USA Today, CNN. And then the bubble burst, and then no one cared about my little .com. NASDAQ went from 5,000 to 2,000. Our investors were worried about losing their mainstream investments, much less their little angel investment in my company. And so my company crashed and burned. I was 26. I just lost people $250,000. I still owed $100,000 in law school debt. And my parents were like, what the heck happened to you? Like, didn't you used to be smart? And so I was trying to answer that question. I said, you know what? I tried to start a business. It didn't work out. But I found that process much more genuine and invigorating, certainly, than being a corporate attorney was. And so I said, I need to get better. I need to get stronger. And so I'm going to ask you guys, what would you advise 26-year-old Andrew, who had just started a company and failed, that wanted to get better at that process of building a business? What would you say to that person to do?
Do it again.
Do it again. So I felt like doing it again was going to be tough because I just lost these people this money, and it was 2002, and no one wanted to invest in anything, and I was kind of broke. But I'm with you. So if you can't start a company again, what might you advise? Or if I were to say to you, hey, that's like a bridge too far for me right now.
Join a startup.
Join a startup, which is what I did. So I became the vice president of something or other at a tech company. There's rampant title inflation in startups. You guys know that, right? Well, if you didn't know that, well, now you know. So I found someone who was more experienced than me, and I knelt and said, please accept my sword, master. And he said, rise, and knighted me. And then I became his sidekick for 4 years. So that company raised $5 million and went to several million in revenue. I then became, as Michael indicated, the CEO of a test prep company called Manhattan GMAT, which taught people how to do well on the GMAT. I believe in very obvious names. And so that company grew to become #1 in the US. And I personally taught the analyst classes at Goldman Sachs, McKinsey, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, and these other firms how to do well on the GMAT. So I joke that I went into these incredible office buildings with beautiful conference spaces, and I was like, let's talk about triangles, because whatever the week was about, it seemed like a lot of overkill. But that company was acquired by Kaplan/The Washington Post in 2009, and I was trying to think of the problems that I'd seen over the years that I might want to try and address personally. And the problem I kept coming back to was that those analysts reminded me so much of myself when I was at the law firm, where they'd done well in school, they got the jobs they thought they were supposed to get, they were working hard, but they didn't really know what they were doing, why they were there, they weren't very engaged with their work, and so they were going to try and figure it out and leave to do something else, but they would take the GMAT as like a safety hatch or escape hatch if it didn't work out. So the path would go 2 years analyst program, try and do something else, find it's not a perfect fit, go to business school for 2 years, load up with 100K in debt, have your choices constrained a little bit, and then go to do something else that hopefully will be a better fit. And that's typically not the last step, because the post-MBA position, the typical tenure, actually, what do you guys think the typical tenure is of a post-MBA position, like measured in years or months?
2 years.
2 years, that's right. So they do that for 2 years, and then they try and figure out the next thing. So I saw that movie dozens or hundreds of times. I saw my own movie and those of my law school classmates, and I was like, wow, what a weird 5-year ringer we're putting so many of our young smart people through. Like that, it's kind of unproductive. And at the same time, I saw that Teach for America had channeled so many young smart people into education, and saw that transformed their lives in many cases. And so I thought, wouldn't it be great if there was a Teach for America for startups? And what do you call that? You call that Venture for America. So I quit my job in 2011 to start this nonprofit. I put in $120K of my own to start the organization, and then went without salary for a year while I was going around recruiting people like Brian. I think Steven actually saw me on that first college tour. I was on Duke's campus, and he said that he was the only one in the room, which is probably right, because not that many people showed up to that first college tour. But now Duke is our #1 feeder school, where we had, I want to say, something like 70 applicants from Duke this past year. And we're going to be one of the top 20 employers out of Duke alone this year. So in 2011, I started the organization. The budget that year was around $200,000. Fast forward to today, our budget's $3.3 million, and we're growing quickly. We had over 1,000 applicants this year. So what we do is we recruit top college graduates from around the country. We bring them to training camp, where we say, look, here's a little bit about startups. You become best friends with each other. They all come to Providence, Rhode Island, and live in a brown dorm. So it's very exciting. Those of you who are young, you can maybe imagine what that's like. And then they work in startups for 2 years. We bring them back together for reunion, have webinars for them, and then they get operating experience. So they work in the trenches of a startup in one of these cities for 2 years. At the end of the 2 years, we have a seed fund waiting for them to invest in them if they decide to start a business. And the angel investors in that seed fund include Jeff Weiner, the CEO of LinkedIn, and a number of other very prominent businessmen and executives. So how many of you guys would have considered a program like this when you were coming out of college? A lot of you, right? So the point is that we want to try and create rational choices for our young people. Like right now, we're saying, hey, here are your 6 menu items, but in our heart of hearts, we hope you don't do any of these 6 things. We hope you do this weird off-menu thing that we're going to hide and make really difficult. And I'm here to say that's really silly. That's like a very silly way to try and build a system or an economy, where what we should do is we should give them more diverse paths and diverse visions of success, and make it just a principled, rational choice, where if someone's designed to try and build something, that's what they should do. If someone's designed to be a contract reader, they should do that instead. But right now, we're saying, look, no matter what you're designed to do, here are the paths in front of you, choose one. That's a little bit like that movie Divergent. Anyone see that movie, Divergent? It's all right, it wasn't that good. But it did remind me of this a little bit. So our mission is to revitalize American cities and communities through entrepreneurship, to enable our best and brightest to create new opportunities for themselves and others, and to restore the culture of achievement to include value creation, risk and reward, and the common good. And if we can do these things, then we believe we can revive the capacity of our top people to end up building the engines of innovation and prosperity for the future. And it's all just about where our talent's going. I think you guys would agree that where our talent goes is going to end up determining the future 1 to 30 years from now. And we can all tell the future as long as we know what our smart people are doing. So I'm going to stop there for a second because I've been doing a lot of talking. Any questions or thoughts on this? Yes.
So you put up a very intriguing list there about what the grads are seeking as they leave college, prestige.
Sure, I can actually bring that back if you want.
And so what's your message to counteract all that? Because that's a lot of weight there.
What's your name?
Philip.
Philip. So Philip, what's amazing is that Teach for America provides all of these things if you look at them, with the possible exception of money. So Teach for America, it's prestigious, it's clearly marked, progress, opens doors, gains skills, community, training, etc. Venture for America checks every box on this list, including potentially money if you stretch your time horizon a little bit. Because if you believe in yourself and think that you have what it takes to start a successful company, then you'll defer some short-term rewards and then maybe have a shot at doing just that down the road. So we agree with you that these are very compelling factors, and we actually want to provide them. And if we provide them, then young people will walk this path. Yeah?
I'm Marcel. Post-grading, do you offer any resources to help get started?
Yeah, so we have, maybe we'll offer them a Microsoft product if all goes well here. So We have 2 full-time programming team members, one of whom is an MBA from MIT, and his job is to just offer professional development, help the fellows get stronger at what they want to do. We also have local resources in place for the fellows where they'll meet with business leaders in their communities, so they get a sense of the leadership in each city. But we have programming, webinars, online licenses for various educational resources, and then we bring them back together for training camp after their first year. Yeah?
How do you choose your target cities? Are there just the 3 cities that you mentioned, or?
Let's see if I have a map for you. What's your name?
Dean.
Dean? Let's see. All right. So I'll go to the, actually, I'll come to the map in a second. What I'm going to do right now is just show you guys some young, idealistic, smart people, which may or may not include Brian. It's just sort of arbitrary. Now, this is just to give you guys a sense as to who's in the program. I think Stephen even has some friends. I don't know if any of your friends are listed here. Do you know Jacob Robinson?
I do know.
Yeah. Do you like him?
But he was a leader on campus. I mean, I bet he could have gone to any bank or consulting firm he wanted.
Yeah, Jacob's a winner. So here are some of the people that made it through our selection process. We have a 3-stage selection process. This year we had over 1,000 applicants and about 100 spots, so it's about a 10% acceptance rate. We had a computer science major from Princeton who turned down SpaceX to join Venture for America. We're getting very, very smart young people. It's, so this to your question before, Philip. And here are some of the people that are out there right now working at startups around the country. So I don't know what you think of when you see these faces. Like, what are the commonalities? I just think smart, idealistic, full of energy and passion, right? You guys see, you can get that from these guys? Plus a little bit of diversity thrown in because we chose the faces. And then here's some of the fellows that are coming out of the program. So our first class is graduating this year. And these guys are actually starting honest-to-God businesses. And I can't tell you how excited I am about that. Because we don't expect everyone in this program to start a business. That would be really very high bar. But I'm going to give some shout-outs. So Brian Rudolph graduates from Emory, moves to Detroit to work at an e-commerce company. And he started a pasta company called Bonza Pasta. That's high-protein, gluten-free pasta made of chickpeas. Who finds that appealing or appetizing? So go to Bonza Pasta and just sign up for their.
Do you have a box of it?
I do not, but you can have a box. Same time I do, and just go on their website, sign up for it. TurnPro, Brent Baltimore and Brian Boucher co-founded a company to help small businesses tell their stories through video editing that's distributed. And one of the ways they get the content is they give the businesses GoPro cameras and say, like, put these on your employees for a couple of days, and then they'll edit the footage into a video for their website. Castle, which is Tim Dingman and a few other guys who aren't pictured. So Castle is a software platform for local landlords. So these guys in Detroit, they bought a foreclosed mansion for $9,000, and then they went around rehabbing it. And while they were doing that, they figured out that there's a disconnect between local landlords that have fewer than 10 properties and tenants, that they just don't like or trust each other. Like, if you ask either party, said, what's the problem? They say, like, those tenants aren't trustworthy, and then the tenants will say those landlords aren't trustworthy. So they're building a communications platform between local landlords and tenants that's then going to build in reputational scores, so that if you're a local landlord that does good stuff, then you end up with like a Castle reputation, and then maybe you can even charge 4 or 5% more rent over time. But in the meantime, it's a communications utility. So these are the startups that our fellows are just starting themselves, having been in these cities for a little bit less than 2 years. An additional about 50% of the fellows are staying in their cities and working at either the startup they've been at for the last 2 years or another startup. So it's actually working on the ground in the most important of ways. So one of the things I realized very early on was that in order for young people to find this an appealing path, it had to be someone that was cooler than me. So I managed to enlist Tony Hsieh, the CEO of Zappos, Jeff Weiner, the CEO of LinkedIn, Dan Gilbert, the founder of Quicken Loans. So Dan's a story unto himself. How do you guys know who Dan Gilbert is or have a sense of what he's doing? So Dan Gilbert's invested $1 billion of his personal wealth into downtown Detroit and is now Venture for America's biggest supporter in bringing talented young people to work at his startups in Detroit. So he's speaking at our summer celebration in June in New York. I guess you guys might not be in New York next month, but if you know anyone, please send them our way. It's going to be a really good party. Dan Porter is the former president of Teach for America from the 90s. He was the head of a company called OMG Pop that made Draw Something that was acquired by Zynga, I want to say 2 years ago. Elisa Volkman was the co-founder of Babbel.com, was acquired by Disney. So we have some real winning people associated with Venture for America, in part because we knew that young people wanted to learn from experienced entrepreneurs. And so the team is very strong. Mike Tarullo's a Duke grad in the same fraternity as Steven, so it's one reason why we're so strong at Duke. We're going to get those brown numbers up. So the team is the team. And so here's the city question. Who asked the city question? What was your name? I'm sorry. Dean. So we started out in Providence, Detroit, New Orleans, Cincinnati, and Las Vegas. We expanded to Baltimore, Cleveland, and Philadelphia. And this year we're expanding to San Antonio, St. Louis, Columbus, and Miami. Now Miami has an unemployment rate of like 10.2%. Just so you guys know. So it's people think Miami is like more prosperous than it is, probably, at least statistically. So these are the 12 cities we're in, and I'm sure you guys have other thoughts as to where we could or should be. We're just going to keep expanding. Each new city needs to have a few things going for it. One, it needs to have a robust set of startups for our fellows to work at, because another premise of ours is that most of these fellows need to have established businesses to work with. Like having them start businesses from day one would be a little bit overambitious. 2, leadership in that city needs to be supportive. And then 3, there needs to be a financial supporter for Venture for America, because our costs for doing what we do are about $35,000 per fellow over a 2-year period, which is about 12% less than what Teach for America is spending right now on a per teacher basis. And they're at scale. They've been doing this for 24 years, and we've only been doing it for a few years. So I think we're relatively resource efficient, but we can probably even get it a little bit tighter over time. So to go to a new city like San Antonio, we received a grant of $500,000 from Graham Weston, who's the founder of Rackspace and now the CEO again. And so when we go to a new city, we're looking for a partner like that to be able to provide a runway so we can operate there for years. Because we know, to your point in the back, it's going to take many years for us to be able to have a real impact. That you send in an initial group of 12 or 15 or 20 young people, that's going to be great. But really, we need to have the maturation period so that those young people end up becoming managers, leaders, founders, and contributors in a meaningful way. So this 107 fellows is from this past year, and we have another 104 fellows coming in for training camp this year, and they're going to be out in their cities by August of this year. So this number will go up to about 210 or so. Yeah?
If I create a startup, for example, how do I engage with your company?
So we have 3 people who go and kick the tires on a startup that's in our, like if you were to be in one of our cities, which city you want to be in?
Say
Seattle. Interesting hypothetical there. So Seattle right now is not one of our cities, but let's say it was, and you just contact us and say, hey, I'm Henry, right?
Yeah.
I'm Henry with a really interesting startup. Think I could use some young, smart people, and then we would send someone to meet with you and say, what is the company? Who are you? What are your needs? And then decide if it's a fit. If they decide it was a fit, which in your case it probably would be, honestly, because you seem cool and you're clearly very smart to have the job you have. So we then put you in the mix, where right now for the 100 fellows in this year's program, there are about 180 positions. So it's competitive on the part of the companies, and we have a surplus of opportunities relative to the fellows. So you'd have to go and compete and try and get a young, smart person that wanted to work with you, and that would be the process. It's pretty straightforward for the companies. We do turn down a lot of companies because they're not growth-oriented enough, the management team doesn't seem strong enough, or the role isn't appropriate. But I'm sure none of those things would apply to you. Yeah.
And so what if there is demand from startups that are in some of the major cities like San Francisco?
Sure.
Do you consider it for the program, or are you just really focused on other areas?
Well, right now we're in these 12 cities, and I dare say that San Francisco is going to be maybe the last city we ever actually go to or open up. But we have people graduating each year, and those people are often going to gravitate to San Francisco or New York or Seattle or these other markets. We actually already have 3 or 4 fellows in San Francisco because their company got acquired and moved to San Francisco because they got into Y Combinator, and so they opened a San Francisco office. So things like that happen, and we're not very dogmatic. It's not like this thing where if you leave your city, all of a sudden we're upset at you. if the needs of the company make it appropriate for you to wind up in any of these cities, obviously that's cool. And the other thing is 2 years is not forever. So let's say we have 100 fellows this year, and then 50 of them end up starting companies or staying in their cities. That's still another 50 young people who are probably going to want to work at startups in San Francisco, Seattle, New York, et cetera. So you can have them seasoned for a couple of years in their city and startup, and then try and hire them on the way out.
The main reason I ask is that there are entrepreneurs that are flocking so much to San Francisco because I'm from the Bay Area. That's where they actually can get connected more easily, but they are not necessarily connected to talent that could help them. So sometimes they can find founders or whatever. There's still entrepreneurs moving in there, but they're not from there. They're just going there because they don't have any other options, or they don't think they do.
Yeah, and it's something that we'd like to combat over time, is this notion that you must move to like a particular geography, San Francisco in particular, if you want to start a business of a certain type. I mean, in order for the economy to grow the way we all want it to, people need to be able to start businesses in cities around the country. And if we can open up the talent pipeline for people who are starting companies in all of these cities and the ones that will follow, I mean, it'll make a big difference. Because in our experience, companies need the following three things. They need capital, they need team and talent, and then they need product market fit. And people talk a lot about the first one, which is just like investment capital. But the entrepreneurs we talk to say team and talent is actually the key driver, and that most of them have trouble accessing that early on. Yeah.
So building on that and thinking about the 30-year growth scale, what happens, or how are you guys setting a system up that would support the growth of the once someone's graduated the program and they've started a company, assuming in that city, do you support their growth, the new company's growth? Because they're drawing from a local talent pool, right? So you're not necessarily you don't have a pipeline of new grads coming in to feed the new startup. And especially if they're growing, they're going to hire 25, 50, 100 people, whatever. So that's going to really, that's really where it starts to affect the local economy in a much more significant way. So what do you have in place for supporting that kind of growth?
So I'm super excited for that phase, and we're just hitting that phase, which is fellows start companies. So our goal is to help create 100,000 new US jobs, and a lot of that's going to be seeing these companies succeed. So I'm very happy to say that the people who have been supporting Venture for America to date, like Jeff and Tony and Dan and UBS and Barclays and all these people, are all hovering there waiting for our guys and gals to start companies so they can come in and say, yes, let's make this stuff happen. And I'm sure, how many of you guys in the room, like you yourselves personally, would like to help these companies succeed, like these 24-year-old start companies? Like you guys all would, right? So I'm happy to say that everyone's all waiting for it to happen, and the fellows are up for the challenge, where they're doing it. But you're right that challenge is going to mushroom quickly over time, where if you look at the math, let's say 20% of our fellows start businesses, that means by 2 years from now, we'll have something like 35 to 40 businesses that we need to help support. And not all those businesses are going to make it, clearly. I mean, we all know the statistics on this. But we have to make it so that enough of them succeed and hire and thrive and hire more people that we can start to have a real impact. Like a pet peeve of mine is institutions or programs that sort of have you for a particular period of time, then when it's over, they shake your hand and say, like, best of luck, you know? And I hate to say it, but that resembles most of the institutions I know that like deal with people. Like for us, Venture for America is much more than like this 2-year program. We want to help you achieve your goals for a long time to come. And I'm happy to say our supporters feel the same way. It's a big challenge, though, no doubt about it. I mean, we're looking at dozens, eventually hundreds of businesses. Yeah.
So you mentioned that the seed funds wait for your graduates, right? So each one of the graduates is guaranteed to get some seed fund?
No. So this year, as an example, we have 4 teams, 6 fellows, 4 teams, and we have $150K to distribute among them, provided by UBS Americas. So they're all going to get something. And then they have this angel council of between 500,000 and $1 million to pitch to, and that's going to be up to the angels how much they want to invest. So you're guaranteed very little. I mean, our program is the real world. Just like in the real world, you're guaranteed very little. You have to fight for it for us too. But it's in our interest to help them to the extent we can. Yeah.
I have an online question from Jeff.
He says, it seems the program focuses on sourcing from elite schools. But there's been a lot of talk in the media that questions the value of college. Are there plans to source kids straight out of high school?
First, I'm happy to say that we had applicants from 142 schools this past year, and we have fellows from schools that no one's ever physically visited because of resource constraints. So we have fellows from University of Oklahoma, Auburn. There's one guy who was a Marine and served in Afghanistan and then graduated from UC Santa Barbara and is now working in Detroit. So we know that talent's everywhere. I mean, certainly if you have a limited amount of resources, you might start at certain schools, but we know that people are capable of great things from all sorts of backgrounds. To the high school, college question, we've drawn a line that we're taking college graduates. That's somewhat arbitrary, but it's just something that we decided to implement. But there are going to be people, in our opinion, and you can see from the nature of this presentation, people are questioning college, but in our opinion, most people probably are going to graduate from, most people of a certain background are probably going to graduate from college, and they probably should graduate from college in our mind. And that if there's a place we can intervene, it's actually in their options after college graduation. So that's the approach we're taking. I know Peter Thiel and others are like trying to go earlier, but we think the crucial juncture is this point after graduation. Yeah.
Now that you're back on the map, I'll go back to the geography topic. Is there anything you do in your marketing or your programming to get people over any reluctance to go to some of these locations? I hear you that 2 years isn't forever, but I know when I was fresh out of school, going to a great place was very high on my criteria. How do you overcome that?
What's your name?
Kim.
Kim. So part of it is the self-selection process, that if you apply to Venture for America, you're not sure where you're going to wind up geographically, so you need to have a degree of flexibility to throw your hat in the ring. So by the time they get to us, they're not fixed on one location. And when they get into the process, they quickly have a sense of the fact that they're going to be working at a real company and get very focused on the specific roles and companies that they're going to be working for. And they become less fixated on what city it's in. So if they say it's like, hey, just give me a great company, I don't care if it's Baltimore, Philadelphia, Columbus, Las Vegas. They just want to find a great company with a team that they mesh with. And that's, again, self-selection based upon the people that came to us. The other thing is that if you were to move to a city and know that you're going to go with like 5 to 10 of your new friends, then it makes most any environment much more hospitable. A number of the fellows are living with people from the program or living in the same building or block. And so if you put that hat on where you're like, hey, I can go just about anywhere if I've got 6 new friends and a bit of a network, then it makes them, I think, a little bit more versatile that way. It's a good time. It's like, it's like 2 years in a major American city or a less major American city, but 2 years in an American city with like 5 new friends. I mean, it's like an adventure. Yeah.
So your recruitment season is like the fall of a potential fellow's senior year?
Yes.
Okay. So a lot of like the places you described where smart people go, like the Goldman Sachs, the McKinseys of the world, they get their students or their future employees locked in that post-junior summer. So how do you kind of combat that?
So we actually are going to start a selection day for juniors, where if they come in, they can get an offer spring of their junior year for the summer after graduation. And that's how we're going to sort of make it even. But it's a great question. The process that we described here does begin very early, where many juniors are getting offers at the end of their summer before their senior year, and then they take it so they can be set. So we're going to do the same thing. Sorry. Yeah.
What about offering internships at these same companies to juniors?
Yeah, we're going to start looking at that as well. We want to go both upstream and downstream. So upstream would be summer internships. Downstream would be PhDs, unhappy lawyers or bankers or consultants, of which there's no shortage, that want to head on and do something else. My brother is an academic, and so how many of you guys are academics? Probably a number of you, or at least not academics, but like got a PhD of some kind. I feel like, wow. So for some reason I thought there's a room full of PhDs. So it does say Microsoft Research in the door, right? So, so my brother's an academic, and I have a sense that there's a little bit of inefficiency going on there. And so we'd like to be able to offer options both up and down over time. Yeah. Gene?
What does Venture for America ask in return from startups?
It's a great question. So for a startup to be considered, like Henry, for example, if Henry were to say, hey, I'd like to hire a fellow, we say, one, you have to commit to paying them a base salary of $38K to start, subject to increases if they work out. So that's very reasonable, but you have to have at least 2 years of runway for that, because it's obviously like a genuine early hiring employee. So that's like the easiest thing. The next is that they need to have a specific role that's not fungible. So you can't have like 5 people doing the same job and one of them is a fellow. You have to commit to sitting down with them once a month as the founder or a very, very senior executive so that they get a sense of exposure to the business. And then you also have to occasionally like let them go to things like training camp, which is, it's within the confines of vacation, but you should know that there's some programming that takes place that the fellow is probably going to want to go to that you should let them do, within reason. And also, you should invest in their development such that you can try and hire them after the program ends, because we're not that interested in companies that are like, hey, this is a 2-year thing and then that's that. We're looking for companies that want to try and fit that person into their team long term. And so if a company falls short of those things and the fellow is unhappy, then we can re-examine the fit, which happened a little bit more in the first year or so, and then the second year a little bit less so, and I think is continuing to improve as our relationships with companies get better and there's a firmer understanding. So, yeah.
I was just curious about interest. For instance, I saw that there was someone who had a degree in religion. And are you matching jobs to the person's degree? Like, how are you actually, are they just doing straight management and they could go to a shoe company? Does that look like?
So let me go back to some profiles. You can see some different majors here and here. I'll use this, because here's your religion major. So Joe Morrison here started a backpack company in college, too. So he's very enterprising. But we believe that talent is versatile and can do lots of different things. And that if you're really good at one thing, you can probably learn to be good at something else. So our fellows have what we call adaptive excellence, which is just they demonstrate they're really good at something, and then we can project that they can learn other things. So I'd say 25% of the fellows are either engineers or hard science graduates, where they studied like biochemistry or chemical engineering or something like that. And then we have a host of social science people like economics, finance, et cetera. And then a handful of humanities people, I'd say about 25% are like Johanna or Joe. So one of the misconceptions we think is out there is that you need to be a computer science major to go into startups. But startups need, as you guys know, very accomplished content creators, marketers, branding people, business development, sales, et cetera. And so what we do is we source for all of those roles in these companies. How many, it's a little bit like what the consulting firms do, because like no one majored in consulting, you know what I mean? If you did major in consulting, people would probably be a little worried about you. So the consulting firms trust that if you're really smart and hardworking and accomplished, that you can learn consulting. And so we're a little bit the same way. Yeah, in the back.
How do university students find out about you? Like some of the schools, like the University of Washington, which probably isn't a school that you go to, I don't know. But do you send out information to all of the different career counseling offices at universities? Or how does someone find you after to apply?
So we have a full-time recruitment team of 3 people. We have been in most major publications at this point, but we also know that college seniors aren't sitting there reading the New York Times or Wall Street Journal, like looking for stuff like us. So we do try and hit the ground at these campuses, but we'd love your help on this. I mean, I think that our brand right now is still building up. Our awareness is still building up. But if you know young, smart people, among your nieces, nephews, friends, neighbors, et cetera, that you think this resembles, please have them apply. I mean, the more talent we get in, the more of an impact we can have. So we're just getting started on that front. But we love University of Washington since we love people from all over. Yeah.
And they have to be coming out of college, or they could have been in the workplace?
They could have been in the workplace. We say 0 to 3 years. So it's senior in college up to a few years out. We had one guy, Brent Baltimore, who was an investment banking analyst at Credit Suisse for 2 years. And then he was also on the national champion rugby team, but that was in college. And then he was a Credit Suisse banking analyst and then left to join us after his analyst program was over. So he had 2 years full. So if you have people that resemble that, you can send them our way too. So what do you guys think? Any thoughts or reactions to this? Is it awesome?
Yeah.
It is. All right, I'm glad you like it. So, the plan here is to fix the country, really. And if we get enough smart people building cool companies throughout the country, we think that this could be a game changer, especially because we could change the nature of people's choices. Because right now there's zero weight or morality to going to be a corporate lawyer. No one says, hey, that's good or bad. That's just what achievement looks like today. But if you have different flavors of achievement where you can say to a younger version of me, hey, guess what? Maybe that's not what you should be doing. Maybe you should be doing this other thing instead. That it can have a profound impact. I mean, that's about the restoration of the culture piece. Because we need our best people trying to solve problems. We can't have people trying to maneuver themselves close enough to the geyser where some of it rains down on them. I mean, that's a bad place to be as a country. Yeah.
What does 5 years from now look like? Are you still around? Are you doing, how's this going in 5 years?
Boy, still around? What kind of question is that?
Well,
oh my gosh.
I don't know. Is this what's the long term look like for this? It's, because it's that 30 years is a long horizon. It's a long time horizon. So.
Yeah, I agree. I was joking with Amy on the way in here. It's in 30 years they'll roll me out, for special occasions, and I'll point some wizened hand at someone, scare some young person. It's been an incredible 3 years. I mean, knowing where we were 3 years ago. I mean, we were me and a PowerPoint deck, and me and Steven in Durham, looking at each other. And now I'm looking at all of you, plus whoever is looking online. It's been an incredible run because everyone wants to solve this problem. So if in 5 years the problem's solved, that would be dynamite. I have an instinct that the problem will not be entirely solved in 5 years and that the organization will still be doing work. And by 5 years from now, these guys would be 5 years out in the field, having run companies for 5 years. I mean, oh my God, imagine what that does. Let's say their company gets to 20 people and then they're hiring people from the program and then they look up to these role models. I mean, the fact that we've done what we've done when these guys are the tip of the spear, it is encouraging in part because it just gets much more self-reinforcing over time. It's if you can go to Duke and say, hey, guess what? Here's a Duke grad from 4 years ago who's now the CEO of a company in Baltimore. You're wait, that's possible? I can do that? It's yeah, you don't have to go to McKinsey, and try and scheme your way out. You can you can do this, and then maybe you can be this guy. I mean, the fact that we've done what we've done without even having that guy to point to or gal, I mean, that's nuts, really. The first fellows deserve a lot of credit in part because they're taking a real leap. But as we build a track record, it's just going to get better. Other thoughts? So where was I on this? Yes. So I wrote a book called Smart People Should Build Things. They're available back there. It's here. So the book's about the ideas behind Venture for America and some of the things that went into founding it. So if you have an interest in seeing how the organization came to be where it is today, the book has that. There's some nice quotes about the book. Who here has read the book? All right. Michael and Amy. So if you want their honest review after I'm done talking, sidle up to them and ask them what they think. One of the things the book does have is it has a breakdown of the 6 paths and what it is that our smart people are doing, and it has primary research on all that stuff. So those of you who are into that stuff, it's a little bit of a social science entrepreneurship tome. So my contact information is andrew@ventureforamerica.org. We're excited to work with Microsoft and all of you. So the three pillars of what we do, you can help with all of them. One is recruiting very smart young people. 2 is enlisting cool startup companies around the country. And 3 is our own organizational resources. So we have young people. I'll give you guys a story. Hopefully it'll make you mad, and then you guys will want to do something about that. So the guy Tim Dingman, he's an electrical engineer out of Brown, and he wanted an engineer mentor. How many of you guys are engineers? an overview? Excellent. So you want an engineer mentor, and then I was like, ooh, we need to get you an engineer mentor. And so we found a guy at Google, Scott Johnston, who's like, I'll be his mentor. So we have a host of young people who all want like experienced professional mentors and resources. And that could be many of you here in this room, where if you want to take an enterprising 22, 23-year-old who's trying to rebuild the country under your wing, please get in touch with us. We'd love that. And so there are many things that hopefully we can all do together. I know you came to a book talk and you're left with now this new set of responsibilities. But this organization is very much a work in progress. I mean, it's a living thing. It changes every day and every week. And so if you think that what we're doing is something that you'd like to help with, please just get in touch with me, and I'd love to hear from you. So I know we've already entered the Q&A period, but I guess we can officially do so now.
Do you have any international students join your program?
We had
I have visa problem.
Yes, it pains me greatly on multiple levels. We have one international right now, but that's sort of an exception because most of the startups don't have the resources to address the visa documentation issue. But it's something that we'd love to help change over time. So we got one, but we'd like to have many, many more. Yes?
Can they work in the country of origin for a startup here?
We haven't encountered that particular situation yet. And we want the person to live and work here in one of these cities to the extent possible, because that's going to be a big part of the social experience and other things. So we probably wouldn't want to have that situation. Caleb, right, Caleb?
Do the fellows have any say into what city they're placed into? Do they have like a preference, or do you place them based on their skills in the particular startup?
They can express preferences, and we try to meet them because it's just good for everyone if someone goes where they want to go. But in order to get into the program, they have to know that there's some flexibility involved, because we may not be able to find that company for them in that city. I joke sometimes that's like we can't invent companies. You know what I mean? It's like the companies that are in these cities are what they are, and if there's a fit, great. I'd say we satisfy preferences a majority of the time, and often when they get into the interview process, they realize that their preferences might not be as fixed as they thought. Iris.
The gentleman up front asked about what your long-term goal was, if you have a 30-year plan. This is just more of some feedback. As you grow, you might want to consider Venture for America veterans and doing the same model for people coming out of the military, or Venture for America mid-level people, not necessarily right out of university, but the mid-group that have been working but also want to be entrepreneurs as well. That could be something on your roadmap.
Yeah, I'd love all of those things. I just want to erase inefficiencies, and there are tremendous inefficiencies around the populations you just described. We'd love to do that. Veterans, mid-level, more experience, et cetera.
One more question?
Yeah, Henry.
Do you plan on expanding internationally in the long run, or are you scoped to the U.S.?
So some people have started Venture for Canada and Venture for India with our blessing. I joke that we don't really want to start Venture for Earth. It just seems a little too grandiose, and there's enough to do here. My personal motivation, obviously I like entrepreneurship and the rest of it, but I'm American. My kids are going to grow up in this country. I want to help this country. If other people want to help their countries, that's fantastic. But that's not really why I started Venture for America. I feel very indebted to this country because I'm second generation, like relatively recent arrival. I just saw there was a problem, and I thought I'd have a shot at contributing to its solution. So that's just my personal motivation. 30 years from now, I'm sure someone will succeed me and say, Andrew Yang, so short-sighted, Venture for Earth, and then there'd be this giant globe, and then it'd be like, our founder didn't have the vision that I have. I'm like this.
Collaborate with people, or be interested in the other entrepreneurs that would be kind of doing similar models? Because I think you could eventually figure out how to bring it together without you losing focus on America.
Well, we try and help Venture for Canada and Venture for India. I mean, I'm very supportive. It's just part of it's that I think organizations do need to walk before they can run and focus on what they need to do. And the U.S. there's so much work to do here. I'm also much more familiar with the setting here in the backdrop. Though people in Europe have told me, like in England, this is super pronounced, and that just replace New York and San Francisco with London, and replace finance and consulting with finance and consulting. So there are like issues around the country. I think there are some universal truths here about just the fact that resources influence the flow of talent, and that if those market forces aren't somehow counterbalanced, then they lead to very kind of extreme perverse outcomes over time. I think that's true everywhere.
Andrew, thank you so much.
Okay, thanks guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed. And before we go, I want to give a huge thank you to all of our God tier patrons over on Patreon.
Yang Gang 2020. Yang Gang 2020. Yang Gang 2020. Yang Gang. Yeah.